Being here from Beachway Therapy Center. I have James from Boynton Beach joining us today, and he's truly a special guest here for us today because he's a huge part of our alumni program. And he wanted to come on and kind of share about the aftercare piece at Beachway. When you're at Beachway, of course, every day is important, but it's also important when you leave that you take the right steps to stay sober and stay mentally well. So we really appreciate you jumping on here, James. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And when I reached out to Beachway and said I wanted to talk to somebody in the alumni program, they said you need to talk to James. He's a light in our and every Wednesday at our meetings, and we appreciate him so much. So thank you again. We were talking a little bit first about your background. Would you mind sharing a little bit about you?
Of course. So I just turned 32 years old. So 32. I am originally born and raised Western New York. And I grew up, I'm not going to go into too much detail about this, but I grew up in kind of your standard class, middle class, little upper middle class. I had both my parents. I have a younger brother, white picket fence, the whole shebang. And stuff changed when I was 10 years old. So up to then, life was okay. Life was normal, right? And then 10 years old, that's when everything hit the fan for me. That's when this avalanche that I was going down for a long time started. I first went through a very traumatic event. So I didn't go to Beachway or I didn't go to treatment like why the average person goes to treatment. Like when you think of it, stereotype, alcoholic, drug addict, whatnot. I mean, I don't have the best relationship with those, but they've never had a hold on my life. My major thing was an eating disorder. And that started when I was 10 years old. I went through a very traumatic experience. And then I was put on these insane crash diets. And this is one of the things I learned at Beachway, that my identity was formed around how I was intaking food and how I was perceiving myself externally in the weight on the scale or the number on the scale, close fit, the whole shebang. And I learned that at Beachway actually, because I brought that up, and they're like, yeah, actually, there's proven science where your identity is formed around the ages of 10 and 12 when you start realizing who you are or start thinking of who you are. And it happened right then and there for me. And then later that year, my parents went through a very traumatic divorce. So that's when things started to kind of unravel a little bit. It's the first time that I remember thinking or experiencing anxiety, first time experiencing depression, and first time thinking of myself as less than normal, right? I wasn't just a little kid anymore. And I kind of kept a great mask on throughout my high school years. I became a professional at wearing the mask. And if somebody who is watching this who is struggling right now on the fence of getting help, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. So I want you to perceive me a certain way, and I want to let you know exactly what's going down deep within, because I'm afraid you're going to judge me, you're going to neglect me, you're going to reject me, and that's what happened during that traumatic event that I went through. So I kept things a trucking throughout my high school years. Went to college, and that's when things really started to get bad for the first time. It's the first time that I ever had any suicidal thoughts. Didn't know what to do. Didn't know anything about mental health. Didn't know how to address that. So I brought that up to my parents. They didn't know back then as well. So we just I saw a counselor, was put on Prozac, and that was it. Of course, I didn't keep up with that because I didn't really know what was going on. And I kept that mask pretty well tight on until I was 25 years old. When I was 25 years old is the first time suicidal thoughts became real. It was the first time that things were getting really, really, really bad to where I couldn't keep the mask on anymore. As much as I wanted to force it, I didn't have the strength anymore. And it was the first time that I went to the psych unit voluntarily. I voluntarily admitted myself. That's when I first did my first IOP, so intensive outpatient. So again, if it's someone who's struggling, if you have any history with treatment, you know probably what I'm talking about. That's where I was educated on mental health, addiction, just interpersonal issues for the very first time. And I was able to keep that mask on for 3 years. 3 years. And on the outside, you wouldn't have noticed that there was an issue. You truly, unless you were really close to me, you wouldn't have thought this person's hurting right now. I kept a steady job, that I was successful in it. It was a career, made a lot of money, the whole shebang, had a lot of close friends, close family members. But, you know, you would just think this person was overweight because my eating disorder was out of control. And that was the one that was really hard to hide. Um, because with it, if you have binge eating disorder like I do, you gain weight very quickly. So people would notice you look different since the last time I've seen you. And I've been on crash diet after crash diet. I've lost a significant amount of weight throughout my life multiple times. And they would see that cycle. So at that time is when the eating disorder was at its absolute worst it had ever been. I could not stop. If you've ever been to an AA meeting, people like to bring up what their drug of choice was and whatnot. And I tell people it's the Golden Arches, it's McDonald's. That's my drug dealer, truly. And I couldn't stop. It was all I thought about. It was all I thought about was the next time I'm getting it, how I'm gonna do it, the whole ritual behind it. If you have an eating disorder, you know what I'm talking about. Usually partake in some sort of ritual with it. Go CD type of thinking. So that's when I hit my bottom. What brought me to get help was not my absolute worst bottom. This one was mine. I was going to commit suicide. It had gotten so out of control where I couldn't handle the thoughts. I couldn't handle the feelings. I didn't care about wearing a mask anymore. I was going to tell people. I was going to show people because it was like a uncontrollable bull, rodeo bull. There's nothing I can do to stop it. Went to the hospital 5 different times in 1 week, and the last time was I live in Florida now, and if you're watching from Florida, you're in a part of the mental health community, you know what a Baker Act is. So a Baker Act is for a term where you are either a threat to yourself or the public in whatever way, and you are involuntarily taken to a psych unit for stabilization. And I had told my therapist I was going to end my life. I couldn't take the pain anymore, and I told my brother that as well. And I didn't know legally that 911, she had to call 911. So she did. And if I knew that one, I wouldn't have told her. The pain was that bad. And that saved my life because I would not be here right now. I am 100% for sure about that. I would not be here today. So that's when I was introduced to AA for the very first time. Best friend at home, struggles with a heroin addiction. He was clean. He's like, you should go to a meeting with me. I was like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. I don't struggle with alcohol and drugs. He's like, well, what else are you going to do tonight? That question changed my life. He's like, what else are you going to do? Just sit home and just ruminate like you've been doing? I'm like, that's a great point. Let's go. And I went there and really connected with what they had to say. And I went to AA, but I didn't really partake in AA at all. I just was a meeting junkie. I get obsessed with things. It's part of kind of my condition. I get hyper focused. So I thought AA was going to save my life. So we're gonna sniper in on that one. So
let me ask you, I think, thank goodness she called 911
yeah,
because you're such a wonderful person. Everybody says it,
thank you.
not just me. But I think the pattern that I see is that these are things that have been with you for a long time.
Oh yeah.
And they were way, way down, right?
Mhm.
These are not things that were just on the surface. They were way, way, way down. And you were trying to figure out a way out. Um, Luckily, you figured out the way out the right way.
Mhm.
What would you say when you got to Beachway that actually helped deal with the root of the problem, not the exterior issues, but really what was going on and torturing you inside?
It's a great question. Um, a couple of different things. One, I was put on the right medication for the very first time. I had my therapist was bringing up for a long time that she thought I was bipolar, and I didn't believe her. And I finally took a shot on bipolar medication while I was there, and that changed. It's been one of the catalysts of healing for me is the proper medication, proper diagnosis, and and knowledge behind that, and the what that looks like, signs to look out for and whatnot for my bipolar. So that's one thing. And the next thing, major thing, was the trauma program. And that was the major reason why I went to Beachway, was when I had hit the bottom that brought me to getting help. I Googled top mental health treatment facilities in the United States, and Beachway was the first one that popped up. And I did my research on Beachway, and I saw that they really hyper focused on trauma. And I knew, because I've done so much other type of treatment throughout my life, of therapy weekly for years, medications, trying all different medications, AA, all that stuff, and all these different diets, whatnot. And they weren't ever they weren't doing anything for me long term. And I realized myself, I was like, dude, there's probably some deep stuff that has happened to you that needs to be addressed, that is fueling your decision making right now. So I knew that needed to be looked at. And that's what one of the things that separates Beachway from the majority of other treatment facilities out there is the trauma program. So I
So
remember sitting.
go ahead. I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
I remember I was telling you this to you before we got on. One of the trauma therapists, her name is Gigi,
Mhm.
and I'd been there for like 4 or 5 days, and she was on vacation. She was gone, but when she got there, she saw me sitting there. I was just waiting to get my medication for the morning, and she approached me and she introduced herself like she knew me. And she's like, I'm going to be running the trauma program that you're going to be in. I've heard about your story, and just saying, I can't believe you've been through what you have been through. And it is an honor of mine to be able to help you process and walk through this. And uh, I think about that often, still to this day. I've been out, what, 16 months now, 15 months. And I still think to that moment of, because that really showed me that she cared. And it wasn't just like, hey, I'm your therapist, nice meeting you, blah, blah. It was like, I can authentically tell that she was wanted to help me.
Yeah, she's
And
amazing. She's absolutely amazing. I mean, the clinicians really do make a difference, that they care, and that they really want to help. I mean, they do the job for that reason. I was just down there with a bunch of them, and all of their goals is really surrounded around the client. They don't have any personal goals for themselves at all. It's just really interesting to see. They're really passionate about helping people. So let's talk a little bit about the alumni program. So you now have been out 16 months. You go to the weekly alumni meeting. You can also go by Zoom if you don't live in South Florida, obviously, for anybody listening. But give me the top three things that you would say that you have in your toolbox now that you've been out for 16 months, that you constantly use, that you also talk about in those meetings.
it's a great question. And first off, the alumni family, I wouldn't even consider it just a meeting. It's a family, like truly. Like, people really do care. Like, it's not just, hey, we're here for each other, whatnot. It's, you'll randomly get text messages from people that you've never met. Hey, checking in, see how you're doing. Haven't noticed you haven't been on in a couple weeks. Everything okay? Like, they don't need to do that at all. Um, the ability that Beachway has been able to do that and set that up is, I mean, was so important for when I first got out of Beachway, was that feeling of community within that. So I love it dearly. I will for rest of my time, most likely. Um, One of the tools is, it's a commonly thrown out word in recovery, but I think it's a little bit different for each person. And it's mindfulness for me. Okay. So with my condition, with the trauma that I've been through, my brain is conditioned to think a certain way or respond to certain stimuli in ways that is not healthy for me. It's a maladaptive coping mechanism. It's a fancy word you'll learn if you ever get help. And so with me, it's truly being mindful in the moment of what is really happening, not what my brain is lying to me about what's happening, but like, let's step away out of this right now. Let's detach from the emotion that you're feeling, and what is really going on. Is this world burning down feeling around you right now, this being neglected feeling, abandoned, is that really happening? Or are we just using the maladaptive coping mechanism right now? So it was being able to teach myself how to do that. And Beachway showed me that. It was be able to teach of like, just like, take a deep breath, take a deep breath, everything is okay. Let's really think about this. There's no need to respond in any way, shape, or form immediately. You can wait. You know, if you don't respond immediately, these people aren't going to abandon you. It's not going to happen. You could tell a lot of abandonment issues, so that I've worked through. So being mindful of just like really stepping back, taking a deep breath, and really taking a scope of what's really going on. Is everything okay? Are you in immediate danger? No. 99.9% of the time, I am not. And then just calming myself down, putting my hand on my heart, taking deep breaths through my nose, out of the mouth, you know, touching something that can distract me, whatever it is, going for a long walk, whatever it is that I use to reground me, bring me back to reality, bring me back to the moment. So that has been, I use it on the daily still to this day, probably will for the rest of my life. It has not become an involuntary muscle yet. I hope one day it does, but at this point, it is not. All right. The second thing, and this kind of intertwines back into the whole abandonment thing, is not being afraid to reach out for help. Okay? Not just like SOS type of help, but just little things. Right? If you might be feeling a certain way. And what I mean by that is not just reaching out, like sending a text to a friend, shooting them a phone call, whatnot. It's asking a question that you think maybe this person might make this person feel uncomfortable, but in reality, it really isn't. Like, it's appropriate to ask because you need that answered within yourself for whatever reason. It's being able to do that. That's asking for help in a way, even though that it might be uncomfortable. It's asking for help. Um, Having those text messages, those phone calls and whatnot to my friends and family with like, hey, I'm having a little bit of a hard day today. Um, can we just talk? Whatever the case is. Um, Letting them know when I'm having a good day, if I want to, sharing it. And the reason I'm saying all this is that I conditioned myself, and the surroundings that I grew up around conditioned me that you are weak if you ask for help, that you are an inconvenience if you ask for help. You're a disappointment if you ask for help, which that's not the case. That's not reality. We're not living in the real world thinking like that. And Beachway taught me that. It taught me that by um, the clinicians literally saying that to me and explaining it to me, and two, being in the format of inpatient treatment, right? You're around people who are like-minded or like-minded struggling, so you can relate to that. You're looking for help. So reaching out to the people that are patients with you, that are going through this journey with you, just be like, man, I'm having a rough day, or that group was tough. That was blah blah blah, and then just being like, yeah, man, same here, or I hear you, I'm listening, all that stuff. And I've been able to take that out now into the real world. It's difficult. And it's a hard one for me. It's a really hard one for me, but it's been very effective. Very effective.
I love when you said you're selfish for yourself, so you don't have to do it by yourself. That's relating to that, right? So you're not
Exactly.
you have to be selfish for yourself. You have to ask for help. You have to ask for
Right.
compassion. You have to ask, um, and you also have to give, right? You have to receive and give, and that's what you're talking about there.
I think it was one of those. I think it was one of those situations. I brought it up to Dina, I think it was. I forgot who exactly, maybe Brandon, I don't know. It was one of the two. About that. Like, I just feel really uncomfortable, asking for help and whatnot. And I forgot who it was, but they said, you know, you are being selfish towards yourself by not asking for help from others, or to letting that out to the world, to people who you feel safe around, on average, that you feel safe around. You're being selfish by not doing that, because you're mind reading right now. You don't know everything. You aren't the smartest person in the room, even though you might think you are, because that was a big issue for me. I thought I'm smarter than you, and I've been through more than you, so your opinion does not matter to me. That was an issue for me when I first got in, and it's like, yeah, that's not the case, James. Like, let's now reground yourself back to reality. And these people love you. They want to be there for you. They genuinely care for you. You feel safe with them. Utilize that. They want that. That's what they're there for.
I love that. Before we run out of time, I just want to also ask you one last question that you and I were talking about. So, what do you feel about not having your phone when you get to Beachway? You don't have full access to your phone when you get to Beachway. What are your thoughts on that? Because
Uh,
this is something that people sometimes want to have their phone, and Beachway allows you your phone at certain times, but not just have free range to your phone. Explain what you think the pros and cons are.
it's not even just the no cell phone. It is, we were talking about it. It's the idea of control. It's the idea of control when people are struggling, they're hurting, they're in a place where they're not thinking straight most of the time. So I think naturally we want to try and keep control of places that we're not comfortable with, or situations that we're not comfortable with, like have some sort of element of control. And not having the cell phone, not being able to talk to your significant other 5 hours a day while you're receiving help, or I want to go drive to the store and buy this, or whatever the case is. It is so beyond vital, because at the end of the day, you are there to help yourself. You are there to disconnect from society, disconnect from outside stimuli that you might not haven't even accepted at that moment, could be influencing the hurt you're dealing with at that time. So I like to explain it to people, because I work in admissions for another treatment facility now. I like to explain it to people. When was the last time you had a relatively short amount of time? If you're going to be doing 30 days, 45, when was the last time in your life, not even just in adulthood, in your life, where you were able to dedicate that on just you, and not by buying things or trips or whatnot, but of healing, getting to know yourself again, forming a relationship with yourself in a healthy way, addressing the issues that's going on, that is fueling all of this. When was the last time you were able to do that? Probably never. It's probably never. You probably don't even know who you are at this moment anymore. Most of us don't. And getting disconnected from a cell phone, from any other that outside stimuli, all that's going to do is it's going to waste time, of the precious time that you have of healing from this thing that you are willing to separate from society for a significant amount of time for. So it's all it is a distraction. You'll be fine without it for the amount of time that you're there, or for a small portion amount of time that you're there. They don't keep it away from you forever. It's just it's it's not as important as you think it is right now, and it's a sense of control right now, and fear and whatnot. Um, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be away from everything that I'm so used to right now. How am I going to be able to deal with my own thoughts? I haven't been able to do that since I was a little kid. So yeah, no
Well,
cell phone in my opinion.
thank you for shedding light on that, because it's a question that we do get often. Well, James, thank you. Is there anything else that you want to add to the community that's listening?
There's a lot more, but we'd be here for hours.
Well, we
You
can always
know,
have you come back.
the major thing, one of the major things with this is, I didn't think that this was possible. The amount that has changed for me since the minute I walked on the airplane, because I left Western New York to come down to Florida for this. The amount of things that have changed. There's a piece of me that wishes I did a little bit earlier than I did, but mostly I've accepted that it was the perfect time for me. It's one of those that you truly don't know. You don't know how much better that this can get. It's not just the like, oh, I can't wait to stop drinking alcohol or doing fentanyl and I just want to live a normal life. You don't know how much better that this can get than just a normal life or of not worrying about overdosing every day or dying of cirrhosis or getting another DUI. That it's infinite. There's no roof or ceiling to how much better your life can get by just dropping all of your preconceived notions and listening to the professionals that know what the hell they're talking about and practicing the known tools that work.
Amazing. Thank you so much, James.
You're very welcome.
Everybody give us a lot of likes and loves. Thank you so much for
It was a
joining us,
pleasure. It was a pleasure.
and have a good rest of your night.
You as well.
Bye.